and amendments and send them off to the Minister for the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery and the Minister for the Environment for their consideration and comments over 15 working days, subject to the satisfactory approval of the Government's Order in Council. So I'm not sure that the Government's Order in Council hasn't yet been completed, but we are working to the time frame that Sorry, I should turn on my microphone. This isn't the last time that we as a council will see these chapters. These chapters, don't look so disappointed. These chapters
Thank you, Leanne. So I think you've summed up really where we are at. So I think I understand that most of you all seemingly have got piles of paper. So we've killed most of the lower South Highland forests to produce this plan. I think, and apologies, I think, from the organisation. Apparently last night the whole system melted down as it tried to deal with that. Firstly, just in that regard, the paper version you see is obviously first and foremost not the version that is actually the version that the community and developers will interact with. The whole thing is designed to be an electronic plan, as those of you who have been through the process will be aware of. We had hoped to actually demonstrate the electronic version of how people will interact with the new plan today, but unfortunately the system couldn't cope with that either. But you're welcome at any time to contact Brigitte or any of her team, and we can arrange for you to work through that document. So while it looks very bulky in a paper form, that's the whole intention and design of the plan is actually to be incredibly streamlined. Really, there are just a couple of things to go through. One is really, I suppose, as the Mayor has outlined, the process step we're at the moment. We are working through achieving the direction and the fundamental direction in the Land Use Recovery Plan, which sets out having the district plan completed by April 2016. As the Mayor has outlined, the tool for that is the Order in Council, which we've been working on or at with SERA officials and MF officials for some time, and the Mayor's and her nominated team have met on this topic a number of times. The OIC is not signed off, and you'll see, I think, that our resolutions are subject to the OIC being approved, because obviously the Council doesn't want to be ultimately signing something until they are satisfied the OIC reflects what the Council understands the agreement that it's reached. So there is that. There are also a number of minor matters that have been asked to be reported back. So once we've got through, I think the sort of the high level introduction and understanding of the plan, I think Brigitte, first with Janine and then with some of the others, will take you through that. So they just need to be signed off so that you're happy prior to those things being finally amended, put into the draft to be submitted to the ministers. As the Mayor's outlined, the ministers get 15 working days to make any comment. Council has to report on those, or staff report to you on those. And where we choose not to take up their helpful recommendations, we have to give them reasons for why we've chosen not to do so. So ultimately, the decision for what ultimately gets put to the community is the council's, and that's an important principle to have regard to. I know there's been discussion along the way about whether it's 1 chapter or 8 chapters or parts of chapters that go out. I think it's important, as I've said in the report, both from a logistical need, but also from a comprehensive sense need to take the body of work that we've got there now out to the community, because the chapters, while they do stand alone, they do also make sense as a group of chapters. So it's really hard to understand the residential chapter without understanding the subdivision chapter and vice versa. So there are a number of chapters in here which are fundamental to the recovery, and that is what was agreed with the Crown, that we will do the priority chapters first. A number of them are what you'd call linked chapters that support those, and then there are a number of other elements in there which are not so important but useful to get out of the way now, like the definitions chapter, like the introduction and the vision. So that's fundamentally why the package that you've got here today is being put up before you. I think rather than have any more comment from me, I think we're certainly open to questions. What I'd like to do, Leanne, is firstly just thank the team. So you see a very small subset of the team behind you. They're the chapter leaders, but certainly my thanks particularly to Brigitte and to Alan Matheson for leading the project thus far and putting all the time and effort, both in terms of preparation, in terms of reporting to you, in terms of consultation, and of course to the rest of the planning team and the council and the consultants we've used through that. So the document is what it is. I don't think we could have got it here without the time that councillors have invested in it. We certainly wouldn't have got here without the time and effort that staff have invested in it. So I just want to acknowledge their contribution as their general manager.
That and reiterate your words of expression of gratitude to those that have really put in an extraordinary effort. I mean, I don't think anyone would have believed it was possible to undertake this amount of work in such a short space of time. And I know that some of the issues between us and the and getting resolution around some of the land use recovery plan, I think held us up a wee bit, and that accept full responsibility as a brand new person coming in. But I think that without having that background about the government's expectations in terms of residential intensification, I think that we lost a little bit of time there. So, I do apologise for that, but I think we came up to speed pretty quickly, and I think we've got a much better outcome than what would have been the case if we'd simply sat back and allowed the substantive rewrite of the district plan to occur. So even though I'm apologising for the pressure that it created later on, I think that from our point of view and for the city's point of view, it was worth it. So thank you very much for allowing us that time to come up to speed and try and influence the change. I think that the introduction is one that we need to do as a follow-on from the other day when Vicky was chairing. So would you like to start with that?
Yes. If I just take you to Section 6 of the report with the title Finalising of Some Matters, in paragraphs 1 and 2, 6.1 and 6.2, we outline a couple of things that still needed to be worked through that we missed out on in the final workshop. One of them is definitions, which Janine will lead shortly, and then we'll have Peter Eamon on the vision statement that will go into the introduction. Right. And then I'll have Mark Stevenson briefly to talk to you about some changes since we've had the last of the independent economic reviews done of the commercial chapter and industrial chapter. So we could start with you, Janine, please. Yeah.
Now, I understand in Appendix 3, there is a collation of 3 summary tables to do with the definitions chapter, the first 2 of which have come to you before. The final table is the one that has the purple text in it. That was the one that I was going to discuss with you on Thursday, but we didn't get around to it. So that's the one I'm going to talk to you about today.
So you might want to find that in amongst all of your papers.
Yeah, if you need it, I've got separate copies here that I can hand out.
So it's in Appendix 3, which you've got a number of these tables on, and that's the one titled Definitions. So you might want to just flick through. You've got quite a number of them. Easier to get the new one.
That way. But if you ring Manisha and said, we've found this amount, we could do this as an immediate match.
Now, as I understand, you've already discussed the accessibility one at one of the earlier workshops last week, and I understand that you're happy with it, so we'll move on to number 2. One of the requests from the public received was that a reference was made to the definitions introductory statement to the effect that if a word or phrase is not defined within the chapter, then the meaning should be taken to be as per in the Resource Management Act, the National Policy Statement on Electricity Transmission, and the Resource Management National Environmental Standard for Electricity Transmission Activities, Regulations 2009. Legal advice to me was that this is inappropriate because it doesn't necessarily follow that the purpose of a provision is achieved by definitions as defined in either that Act or those 2 other documents. So the recommendation there is that there's no change.
How many words does that affect?
Sorry?
How many words or phrases does that affect?
I don't actually know. I didn't go that far to look. But certainly, I'm not even sure necessarily, without having done that exercise, that there would have been other definitions within those acts that should be in the chapter.
Right.
And in fact, if they are needed, then it should have been identified already through the means of developing the chapter.
Yeah, well,
anyway.
I mean, I wasn't here for that debate, but it seems odd to me that there would be words or phrases left undefined that are defined in other legislation. So
Yeah.
because if the meaning was different, then you'd want it to say so, and if it was the same, then a reference to it wouldn't make any legal difference. So anyway,
Right.
all right.
Number 3, another request that was that we streamline the definitions relating to the accommodation and care of the elderly. At the time that we consulted with the public, there were 6 definitions sort of around that area, which are listed there in the left-hand side column. Of those 6, since then, care home has been renamed care facility, and that remains within the plan. Daycare facility has been deleted in favour of care facility, insofar as it relates to looking after elderly people on a daily basis without on-site residential accommodation. The definitions of elderly person and elderly person's housing complex have both been deleted as they're no longer required. And the definition that was elderly person's retirement village has been amended in part to achieve some of the things that the requester was hoping to achieve by a new definition shown there that's based on the definition out of the the Retirement Villages Act, to the extent that it's considered appropriate to meet planning objectives within an RMA document. So this new definition, retirement village, in conjunction with the definition of care facility, goes a lot further in terms of meeting what the requester had hoped to achieve. Okay, over 2 pages. We've got support from a requester for the definitions of critical infrastructure and electricity transmission network, so no changes there. A request has been made for a new definition for hazardous facility, and this is one that's more appropriately considered in phase 2 through development of the hazardous substances and contaminated land chapter. So for the moment, there is no change recommended. There's likewise been a request for a new definition of the national grid, and no changes proposed there for the reason that national grid refers to electricity-related assets owned by Transpower only, and because there are assets owned by other than that particular organisation, it was considered too restrictive and best left open to take into consideration all of those. So the changes, there's no recommended change. The next one, number 8, again at the time of community consultation there were 3 somewhat confusing definitions, all had the word sensitive in the title. One of those related to noise sensitive activities, one of them related to electricity asset sensitive activities, and a third was more of a spatial definition that was applicable in the industrial and commercial zones only. The request was that we combine those definitions just to so that they weren't as confusing. In considering those, the proposed definition in the column to the right there, it is possible to combine what were the electricity and the noise sensitive related definitions into a single definition,
That's
which
smart.
I've done. So
Yep.
part A relates to electricity, part B relates to noise.
Yep.
The sensitive areas definition, it's not appropriate that be included because, as I said, it's a spatial definition that
Yep.
relates elsewhere. 9, we've got support for the definition of strategic infrastructure. Number 10, again, a new definition has been requested for transmission line corridor. This has been considered unnecessary because the distances referred to within that proposed definition have in fact been included within the rules of the subdivision development and earthworks chapter.